Welcome into episode 244 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. The Bruins defeated the Montreal Canadiens 5-2 on Saturday night at the TD Garden. Bridget and Scott, let's get right into our opening shifts.
Well, obviously, the big story of the weekend for the Bruins was not a positive one. Late Friday night, early Saturday morning, Milan Lucic was arrested following a domestic incident at his home in Boston. Bruins announced he's taking an indefinite leave of absence. The latest news on Sunday, and this is via the Boston Globe, is that Lucic is due in court Monday or Tuesday to face a charge of assault and battery on a family or household member. So obviously just a really bad situation. One that, at this point, the Bruins, in terms of like coaches and players, have no control over. And obviously they did a good job finding a way to compartmentalize and go out and play a game and beat the Canadiens and really, as we're going to get into, play one of their best games of the season. But obviously a lot of stuff still to come in terms of what this means for Lucic, what it means for the Bruins, if he's going to come back at all. Just obviously just not enough information known right now. As the Bruins have said, as a lot of people said, like your first thoughts are obviously just for the well-being of his wife and children, and and then go from there. But yeah, that's kind of where things stand right now. Is the Bruins obviously have a situation they no one ever wants to deal with or have to confront, but it's there, and it obviously is going to have a pretty significant effect on Milan Lucic's future, I think.
Yeah, I mean, think about last week. He was on the broadcast for Nesson, and everyone was like, oh, he'd be a great commentator. And it's like, it's not just affecting his time in Boston as a Bruin, like on the ice. Like, think about, maybe that could be gone for him as well. Maybe a potential like career in broadcasting or anything like that. All of it's affected by the situation, and we're only a few days out from it. Like when we're recording this on Sunday, we still don't have a lot of information. So, but it kind of seemed clear from the first report of this that there's a chance he's not back in Boston at all. The indefinite leave, and also if the team decides that that's a character move that they just don't want to, keep around someone that did that that could happen as well. So, I guess I'll get into mine as well. My opening shift is Trent Frederic had himself a really good game, a 2-goal night for him. He was looking for the hat trick, or maybe a Gordie Howe hat trick, because he was looking for a fight as well at some point in there. But his 2 goals came. He deflected one in. He was where he needed to be on the ice, both offensively and defensively. And something coach mentioned after the game was Frederic is somebody that's underrated, he thinks, because he plays such good defense. And you see, when he's going, like when he's getting to the net, he can be a force. And he thinks that there's teams that kind of look past him and don't give him enough credit, but he had a really good game, looked very confident out there playing in front of his father, as all the dads were there.
Yeah, he had a great game, obviously. Yeah, for sure. And for me, I guess my question in my opening lead is obviously Matt Poitras has gone a little bit dry in the production department after his strong preseason and even his strong first 6-7 games of the year. He's around 8 points in 16 games played now, I believe is what it is. And I guess my question for you guys is, obviously it's okay. Like, he's 19 years old. He's still getting his feet wet in the NHL. Not a huge deal. What I would ask you guys is, have we expected a little bit too much of him offensively based on his preseason and the starts of the season? Are the expectations where they set a little bit too high?
I don't think
for
so.
right now.
Yeah, I don't think so because honestly, like there were no expectations. The expectation was he was going to play another year in juniors. So I've kind of felt all along it's almost like whatever you get is gravy, and obviously at some point that shifts because he becomes an everyday player in your lineup, and then certain expectations come along with being an everyday top 9 center, which is what he is. I think fortunately for the Bruins, Zacha and Coyle have really picked up their production and are producing like top 2 centers. So Poitras can just be your third line center. Yeah, I mean, I think it's like 1 point in his last 4 or 5 games, but I thought that line was great on Saturday night. Him, Heinen, and DeBrusk. I thought we're all over Montreal like every shift, and they didn't score, but shot attempts when they were on the ice were 17-4 Bruins. Shots on goal were 9-2. Like it was pretty dominant. I thought they were doing a lot of good things. So I sort of feel, I'm gonna sound like a broken record because like I said this about DeBrusk, but I do believe that if you play the right way and do the right things and create chances, eventually you get rewarded in the points column. And that's kind of how I feel watching that line Saturday night is if they play like that, there aren't going to be too many games that they're held off the score sheet. So, yes, you need to see a little more offensive production at some point, goals, assist points. But if they were playing poorly, I'd be more concerned.
Yeah, on Poitras, I mean, in the beginning parts of the season, he had that 2-goal game in Anaheim, and everybody was like, okay, wow. If he can do this, then he's gonna way outdo expectations of a 19-year-old kid that's coming in to take a center role when they didn't even know he was going to be ready this earlier in his career. So he had a stretch there. We had like 3 goals in 2 games, I think in mid-October. And he hasn't scored in the last 5 games. He went from at one point in the season being like their second or third highest goal scorer to now he's 7th. So he's dropped down the list a little bit, as you mentioned. Like Trent Frederic passed him, Charlie Coyle passed him. There's a few other Bruins that have started to produce it, like Pavel Zacha, like you mentioned, that have gone ahead of him in those categories. But I do feel like we saw some flashes of him in those games where he was scoring or when he was more involved offensively, that like I don't think that has gone away in his game. Like there's still potential for that to be there, but I think that for whatever reason, the way that he's been playing with next to certain players hasn't looked as good as with others. And when he had him playing next to Pastrnak, it looked good. But you probably don't have the luxury. Everybody wants to play next to Pastrnak. You can't play every single player next to Pastrnak. So like when it was Zacha, Poitras, Pasta, sure, that looked great. But it's not feasible to do that because you need to use Zacha as a center. So he like you mentioned before, he should be able to play with Jake DeBrusk and have that get going, but both of those guys haven't found as much offense really recently as some people would have liked. We had a whole discussion about Jake DeBrusk the other day, whether or not the numbers were, what was the word? Unacceptable. And whether his play has been unacceptable, which by the way, coach brought up again after the game against Montreal. He thought that was Jake DeBrusk's best game, and he didn't score. He had an assist on, I believe, the second Frederic goal. And, proof that he's playing and the team sees him and the effort he's putting in, even though he's not producing goal-wise, like, he still brings a lot to the team. So I know kind of switched from Poitras to DeBrusk there, but I guess they kind of fall in a similar category where numbers-wise right now they're not as high as other people, but you still see them getting involved in different ways.
Yeah, and they do kind of coincide right now because in their last 10 games combined between the two of them, they have 2 points combined between the two of them, 2 assists in 10 games. So, and a lot of that time has come together 5-on-5. So I guess the good news is the team is still winning. And I guess the good news is, like everybody keeps saying, all right, if you're not producing, at least what else are you doing to help the team? And that's great. But people are saying if DeBrusk is slumping, at least he's helping in other ways. That's great. But a slump kind of indicates that you were once scoring prior for it to be a slump. He's kind of just been slumping out of the gate this year, off at least production wise. And Poitras has slowed down. Poitra's gone into a bit of a slump. So I guess my question is, Scott, you say that they played well together yesterday, and they did. But they're not scoring as a combination. If you look at like what I just said, the last 10 games combined, 2 points between the two of them. So do you try to switch something up combination wise, keep that Frederic, Coyle, and Van Riemsdyk line, but do you try to shake something else up to get them going, or do you give them just more time to just, because the team's winning, right? So there's no harm in, I guess, letting them continue to run and try to build something.
Yeah, I would just keep giving them opportunities, because not only are the Bruins winning, but they're playing their best offensive hockey of the season over, I'd say, the last week and a half, maybe 2 weeks. They've scored 5 or more. They've scored 5 goals in 3 of their last four games now. Early on this season, we didn't think there would be many games like this where they scored more than 3. And now, admittedly against some teams that aren't great defensively, but still, like, they played teams that weren't great defensively earlier in the season, and they weren't consistently scoring 5 goals. So, Jim Montgomery has talked about how he's happy with them getting out of their zone quicker, getting through the neutral zone quicker, holding on to pucks longer in the offensive zone, defensemen having more of a shot mentality. So all of that is happening, and I think you're seeing the top 2 lines produce. You've seen the 4th line chip in with a couple goals. And for me, I've seen enough encouraging signs from that Poitras, DeBrusk, Heinen line that with everything else going well, I would let them play through it and see if it starts to click in terms of goals. See if DeBrusk gets a couple. Like, you have an incredible luxury right now where so much else is going right on the ice, at least, that, I don't think you have to break that up just to try to get one or both of those guys going. I think you can try to let them work through it together.
In that time frame too, when they first put Heinen on that line, once Geeky got hurt, I think Heinen's played well too. Like, it's like you see some individual efforts from each of the guys that you're like, okay, well, they're doing the right thing. This should lead to something. And we've gone over it with DeBrusk and now Poitras, but also with Heinen. Like, he has had some games where he's doing a lot of things right and getting involved. And he's kind of been a good playmaker. Like, we've seen him be able to move pucks and win battles. And so that line, in theory, has these pieces that should come together and work. It hasn't yet. So I guess what Scott's saying is don't fix what isn't broken with the other few lines by just deciding to blow this one up at this point. I think that's what you meant, Scott, right?
Yeah, and also worth noting in this, I know we started on Poitras, but obviously DeBrusk is part of this as well. DeBrusk did have a point Saturday night, did a good job getting the puck out towards the end of a penalty kill that ends up leading to a chance for Trent Frederic right out of the box, and that's his second goal. So, at least DeBrusk did get a point there.
Yeah, and yeah, sorry, Bridge. I was just gonna say to segue into your opening shift with Frederic, but did you have anything else on DeBrusk there?
No, I was actually going to transition as well.
Yeah, no, I just I really like that burst of speed and that finish that Frederic displayed on that goal. It's moments like that where you think to yourself, maybe Frederic in his prime, which what's he, 26? So over the next couple of years, like if he could really polish his game, could he become, does he have the ceiling of a second line winger, you think, in this league, if he would have really polished that power forward game with some consistency? Or do we think he's kind of maybe capped at a third line role? And just you guys, Bridget, to expand on your opening shift, just your thoughts on him.
Yeah, well, yeah, the keyword there being like power forward, like what's his ceiling as a power forward, because you see him make those strong moves to the net. And he's got enough size and puck protection that he should be able to move around his defenders when he's on his game. He does. I don't know about the ceiling for him. We've seen, I think for him, it's not necessarily about like, is he a top six winger? I think it all depends on who you put him with. So it's like, if he meshes best with in your top six, like with that center, then yes, he's in your top six. But he's a very complimentary player to someone like Charlie Coyle. Whereas, I'm not sure what that would look like next to a different center. We've seen how successful it is with the right person. So I guess that's kind of like a non-answer, Brian, to your question. But in his career, we've seen him play best when he has that chemistry already built in. He feels more confident. You could see his confidence in the game against Montreal. So I think that's the best answer I can give right now.
Yeah, I mean, technically he's playing a top six role now, and that line is at the moment producing like a second line. Personally, do I see him being like a bona fide second line winger? Probably not. I've never quite felt like that's his potential. Like I think he can be a really good third line winger or a second line winger in a situation where like the other two spots on the line are kind of loaded up, and he can be the complementary piece who gets open in the slot and pots a few goals. But that said, as I started with, like, that line is the Bruins' second line right now. I know we've said in the past, like, or I've said, like, that line and the Poitras line, just call them the middle six. Like, it doesn't really matter which one's listed second or third. But right now, one of them is producing like a top six line, and one's not. And it's the JVR Coyle Frederic line that's producing and has been really good for the Bruins. I mean, Coyle's 14 points in 16 games, JVR 12 and 16, Frederic up to 5 goals now. That's, tied for fourth on the team. So actually all three of those guys have 5 goals. So it's working right now. Do I think Trent Frederic produces like a second liner all year or in future years? I don't know. I'll have to see it. I'd, love to be pleasantly surprised though.
And something else that I want to add to what I was saying was playing with James Van Riemsdyk. Like, we've seen how Frederic has grown playing with Charlie Coyle, right? And kind of taking some of Charlie's game and being able to learn from him. Putting him with James Van Riemsdyk, who is a really strong forward, who is really good in front of the net, are also some certain skill sets he could learn from Van Riemsdyk and make himself a better forward. So like, he's on this line, he's surrounded by two guys that he could learn a lot from and take different parts of their game and do them well, because we've seen him net front. We've seen him, like, he did have a goal tipping in a puck against Montreal. He can be a pest in front of the net. So maybe he learns a little bit of nuances that he didn't know before from Van Riemsdyk about like screening or like net front. I just feel like there's some potential to grow for him there with a new teammate to learn things from on that line.
So, Scott, your opening shift had to do with the Milan Lucic situation, and obviously, from what we've gathered, and obviously the off ice situation is obviously unacceptable. But as it pertains to the on ice, opportunity, right? Opportunity for somebody new to get a chance on that fourth line, or to continue to get a look on that fourth line, because if you're Lucic, you re-sign in Boston for the 100th season, plays 4 games, gets hurt, it's been out of the lineup since. Now the off-ice issue seems like he's gonna be most likely not playing another game in a Bruins uniform. So for Lucic, not the homecoming he was looking for. For somebody like Oscar Steen, continued opportunity. So just elaborate and expand on the opportunity that Lucic's absence now and going forward probably presents for somebody else in that fourth line. And we talked about in the beginning of the year, we kind of like that Lucic, Loco, Johnny Beecher makeup. Seems like that's no longer going to be an option. So where do the Bruins go from here?
Yeah, well, and I do think part of what allowed the Bruins to just keep doing that thing on the ice Saturday night is that they've already been playing without Lucic. He's, as you said, he got injured the fourth game of the year and hasn't played since, and that was nearly a month ago. They've already gone 9-1-3 without him. Oscar Steen has stepped up on that fourth line, and we talked about, like, do you keep him past the 10 games, worry about the waiver situation? That conversation's over. Like, obviously he's sticking around. Danton Heinen has gotten better and better since first signing. He can fit anywhere in the bottom six, and Jacob Lauko's back from his injury. I thought Saturday night was his best game yet. I thought he was really active, had a couple good chances he just couldn't finish off. Threw a couple good hits. Morgan Geekie was on the ice in a red no contact jersey at Sunday's practice. That was the first time he's been back out on the ice with the team. No timetable yet. Montgomery said, he's just starting the build-up process, so they're not going to set a date for him just yet. But usually, kind of once you're back on the ice, you're probably a week or two away. So if I had to ballpark it, I'd say, looking towards maybe next week for Geekie to be back. So yeah, suddenly like that brings you, and Patrick Brown's still around, even though they put him on waivers. He cleared waivers. They haven't sent him down to Providence. He's still in Boston. When Geekie comes back, that's 14 forwards. My guess is Brown probably goes down to Providence, and you've still got a pretty deep group, and you've got a fourth line that's been effective with Lauko, Beecher, Steen. I think there's still some work for that line to do. It's not perfect yet. That's three younger players who I think have to learn. Part of being a fourth line, part of the way that they want to use Beecher is he's going to be out there and 1-goal games protecting leads. He's going to be getting defensive zone draws. He's going to get some shifts against top two lines on opposing teams. As a whole, that line's going to have to kind of learn how to handle that because they haven't been through it yet. They're, like I said, they're three young players. But yeah, I think on the ice, I think they can overcome this. It's more on, just the human being side of it off the ice. Of you think of guys like Marchand and Pasternak who have been friends with Lucic for a long time. Other guys, those younger guys I just mentioned on the fourth line, who were looking up to Lucic as like the leader of that group early in the season. He was the one kind of leading the way, like we saw Foligno do the last couple years. Like that's gone now, so you don't have that security blanket. You don't have that veteran on your line to bounce ideas off. So, this isn't going away, obviously. I just mentioned, like, Lucic is doing court Monday or Tuesday. There's going to be more to come out of this. And we'll see. The Bruins can obviously act on their own at some point if they want when it comes to his roster status. I would expect the NHL, if they're not already, will be involved to some extent. The league can and should be involved when it comes to something like domestic violence. So, lots of questions still to answer. But on the ice, if the Bruins can stay focused, I certainly think they have the guys to overcome it.
Yeah, and first thing that comes to mind too, just in terms of like personnel, not having anything to do with the the situation, just like in terms of what Lucic brought when he was on that fourth line. He was the most physical guy in that line. He was the guy that and we had talked about this actually, maybe if he was going to be back in time for that Toronto game, he might have to fight somebody like Ryan Reeves. Like was maybe your only guy on the roster that you would be able to throw out there against, the higher end tough guys in the NHL like Reeves, and that won't completely get their ass handed to them. So you lose him for what we thought would probably be an important role for him if he were to get back into the lineup for that matchup against Toronto. And just in general, in the offseason, one of the main points of emphasis that the organization tried to get out there was this year we want to be more physical. And bringing back Milan Lucic was part of that. We want to be a tougher team. We want to be a little bit more big, bad Bruins-like. And this is their biggest piece in terms of that kind of mentality. Not that other guys aren't physical, but it's just different. This was the old school definition of your classic tough guy. And for him to not be available the Bruins lose that element. We don't know how long he's going to be gone or if he's ever going to be back, but you're losing that element indefinitely at this point.
Yeah, and I think to your point, Bridget, like that, again, you have to compartmentalize, right? Because what happened off the ice is an off-ice issue, and that's, none of us obviously condone what he did, and it's terrible. Or from from the information that's out there, and we don't know the story. But as it pertains to on the ice, my mind does go to that Toronto game, right? I feel like Toronto's going to want a score to settle on that Marchand thing. And so now it's like, okay, does Trent Frederic have to step up, to your point, and take on Ryan Reeves? Because there's really, despite Dan Heinen's efforts to fight, who was it after that hit on Poitras against Montreal? You're right. Like if somebody has to step up now against the true heavyweight, it would probably have to be Frederic, because even last year you had Foligno, right? Nick Foligno could go out there and step up if he needed to. Now it's just Frederic. Lucic was the guy to kind of play that role if need be, and now it's looking like that is no longer an option. So yeah, it does kind of affect the on ice product going forward for in those key moments, and again in playoffs too, like you mentioned.
And also, like, we're talking about how we think Frederic could be more of an offensive role. Like, we're talking about him being a power forward. We're not talking about him being an enforcer. Like, his role as of right now on the team is best served not with those kind of antics. Though we know, like, internally he has that kind of personality. It shouldn't be his job. He should be, maybe agitating here and there and doing a little bit of those things when it's necessary, but you also want to free him up to actually be an offensive threat as well. And you don't usually have a top six guy stepping up to fight Ryan Reeves. And it just makes it makes the team less tough. And I want to also qualify that that's also what makes this so scary, the domestic violence situation, because when you have, like, he is clearly a very strong person who I would not want to have anything physical happen with somebody like that. So it's what it made him an asset to the Bruins, but also makes the situation even scarier because we know he's so strong and this is what he does for work.
Yeah, and as far as the physical element, one thing I would point out is we came on here after last Saturday's game in Montreal, thought the Bruins got pushed around a little bit and didn't have, a great response. We wondered at that point if, could Lucic be back a week later in Boston? He wasn't going to be anyways because he had a setback with his injury. But the Bruins did respond physically. Like, I thought they were the much more physical team Saturday night. In addition to everything else, they were just the better team by a lot. But you saw some guys throwing their body around. McAvoy had a couple big hits. Lauko, I already mentioned. Johnny Beecher had 5 hits in like the first period and a half. So I did think guys stepped up that way. And as far as fighting, look, it's not a huge part of the game anyways. We're talking about Ryan Reeves. Ryan Reeves just got healthy scratched on Sunday. Like, he might not even play. So he's been awful for Toronto. Another signing that straight up has not worked out for them. So it might not be as big of an issue as some people might think it is or wonder about, because even if Reeves plays, like, he's out there 4 to 5 minutes, and if all he wants to do is fight, then I don't know, skate right around him and go get a scoring chance. Like,
do you think though this affects the playoffs, like the way that you want to play in the playoffs, especially last year? Like, I think the idea to add toughness had to do with a trying to prepare for a longer playoff run. So I don't know if you guys think that really, like, the longer term way that he would have been used in the playoffs potentially is kind of lost.
I feel like, and I could be wrong, but I feel like Lucic's presence was never going to make or break the Bruins, chances at success in the playoffs. But I do think that there's a tone that can be set when you have that. Like, for example, let's just say, hypothetically, the Bruins got into another playoff series this year against Florida. Like, is Lomberg, is Nick Cousins, is Sam Bennett, is certainly Matthew Tkachuk, right? Are those players still doing the antics that they did last year if they have to answer to Lucic? I think the answer is yes, but the difference is, okay, but now you're going to answer to Lucic, right? So, like I think Lucic would go and grab Tkachuk by the collar, and so in those situations, I just think it's good to have that muscle when push comes to shove in that time of year. But it's not the end all be all. And again, we have to see what happens, how this plays out. But it seems like the Bruins would be without that presence, so they'll have to create that nastiness in their game with who they have now going forward and whatnot. But I do think that, look, I think that's why the Bruins went out and got him. To your point, like they got pushed around when it mattered most last year. Tkachuk had his way. And there's a handful of guys in the NHL now that if they're on your team, you're gonna think twice. He was one of them. So it looks like they might not be with him anymore, but we'll see how it plays out. Scott, do you echo that? How do you feel about that playoff tone setting and having a presence like that?
Yeah, I kind of feel like there's so much time between now and then that if you're the Bruins, there's time to figure out your identity and figure out who's physical, in what way, what line has an identity. Like, you can work through that, and if come trade deadline, let's say Lucic is gone and out of the picture at that point, if you feel like you need to go get someone who brings back some of that toughness, you can. And honestly, like, that's probably going to be pretty cheap. Like, those guys don't got a trade deadline time. So, I would also note that even if Lucic were here, there's no guarantee he would have even been playing come playoffs. Like, it's possible other guys would have passed him. We know he's not what he was his first time around in Boston. He's become a fairly limited player as he's gotten older into his mid-30s. The Bruins had AJ Greer last year. They didn't put him out there to send some sort of message. They left him on the bench because he wasn't one of their 12 best forwards. So, that could have been the case anyways. Like, it's entirely possible that Lucic would not have been one of their 12 best forwards come April and might not have even been in the lineup to settle any scores or force someone to answer to anything.
It's kind of funny you bring up AJ Greer, though, because not knowing that Lucic was going to, first of all, get hurt so early in the season, and also, with this situation now indefinitely, AJ Greer is someone that they could have used. They maybe would have not waived. We know he got picked up, and he's no longer with the team after getting waived after training camp. But he is a guy that, when you think of, okay, who can come up, like, he was a guy that stepped up for them last year. He played fourth line minutes. He carved out his spot on that line for different chunks of the season. And he's definitely a different style player than Oscar Steen. So maybe having him around would have relieved a little bit of what we're talking about. But at the same time, I think I agree with Scott in this way. Like, fourth line, the way it is right now, is not a bad line. It lacks that extra grit, but it's still, I like Steve and I like Lauko and I like Beecher. So, yeah, trying to find another fit for a spot in the lineup for a tough guy it have to be the right guy. I almost feel like it would be maybe going out of the way to do something maybe that's, to Scott's point, may or may not be 100% necessary, but we know how the playoffs are. So, and we've seen teams that are physical be able to have those kind of intangibles and success. So,
and I also think that toughness can be acquired not through fisticuffs, right? So like, I'm gonna throw out a name, and this just popped into my head just because of the conversation we're having. And Nikita Zadorov is a guy out in Calgary that's requested a trade. Yeah, I got to be honest, because it just popped into my head. I don't even know what his contract looks like. I don't even know if the Bruins would ever even have an opportunity to fit him, or if you'd want to. But like, like somebody like that, what is he, 6'6", 250? Like, I mean, you play against him in 7 games, a guy who can play regular shifts in the NHL and be an effective player. Like, that's toughness, shift in and shift out. I would take over somebody like Lucic, who can at this point in his career only really offer you a fight or like an assist here and there. Have you guys thought about Zadorov as somebody at all, since only because he requested a trade? Has his name crossed your mind about maybe the Bruins should look at him if the opportunity presents itself?
It's crossed my mind, but I don't really see a fit. I mean, the Bruins are already, once Grizzly returns, 7 deep, 8 deep on defense, if, depending on how you feel about Ian Mitchell. Like, yeah, he brings something a little different. Right? Like, the Bruins have other guys with size, but he does bring a little more nasty. I think just from like some of the reports and rumors out there, I think the asking price right now is probably too high, and I think there's a lot of people overrating Nikita Zadorov, who I don't think is a great player. I think he's tough, and ideally on a team that wants to compete for a cup, he's like your 6th defenseman in my mind. I feel like right now the asking price is probably like treating him like a top 4 defenseman, and that's just way too much for me. So I would be perfectly fine just standing pat and letting that play itself out. If someone else wants to overpay for him now, great, let them. If he hangs around and you can slow play this, and somewhere closer to the deadline it drops a lot and he comes cheaper, maybe you circle back then. But right now, I certainly don't have a whole lot of interest in Zadorov at like a top 4 asking price.
Yeah, it's probably because he had last year, his numbers were better than they've ever been, and that apparently like probably still keeps the asking price, the expectation up a little bit. But no, I get why you bring them up though, Brian, because we've had questions from listeners about upgrading on defense or trading a defenseman. So if you're making a move for someone like a top 6 winger, and you're moving out in that trade, you're moving out a contract of like Forbort or Grizzly, maybe you do make a coinciding move. Like maybe if there's multiple moves to be made, maybe you make a coinciding move like that. Cap dependent, as we have mentioned every single other time, and it would seem like you'd probably need Calgary to hold on to a little bit of that contract, because it's 3.7 million or just about that. So yeah. I just
think, and there's a lot of logistics that go into it to even make that work. A guy like that, I try to pretend, okay, how would I feel if I had to watch the Bruins play against him in a playoff series? How would I feel if I had to watch Marchand or Pasternak or, whomever go into the corners with him for 7 games? I'd be like, well, that sucks. Like Zadorov could literally put them out of the series at any point. and he's not going to get out muscled in front of the net. And I just think that I think he'd be a pretty good guy to have on your team in a playoff series or 4. You're not going to get pushed around at all. So I don't know. I wouldn't bring him up if he wasn't requesting a trade out of Calgary, and just how you guys would like to see him on the Bruins, if at all. And it sounds like Scott's not too enamored with them. I think I'd kind of welcome it if it worked out. Again, depends what the asking price is and for how much, blah blah blah. But just if we're talking about what he brings to a team, I don't know. Is Matt Grzelcyk a better hockey player than Nikita Zadorov? Absolutely. He moves the puck better. He's a better skater, all those things. But I don't know. It's always about the best players. It's about the right players. And I think that I would take him on a back end in a playoff run. That's all I'm saying. But maybe he sits in Calgary and it's just awkward as hell all year. That's a tough situation, you know?
Yeah, I mean, Calgary is going to be a really interesting team to watch. Just in general, this whole trade deadline season, because they have there were lots of rumors about them over the summer. None of them really came to fruition. And then I think they sort of thought, you know what, like we feel like we still have a pretty good team. Let's see how the season goes and revisit. And the season isn't going well, and now they have all these pending free agents, and another defenseman that I know has been linked to the Bruins many times in the past is Noah Hannafin, obviously, local kid, BC product, who there were reports that like shortly after opening night he was close to an extension, and then because they were struggling so much, he basically pulled back from the negotiating table, and now it sounds like he's not going to sign an extension. So, Elias Lindholm still has not signed. Like, if they do end up deciding to sell, like they're gonna have some really valuable pieces. And if you're the Bruins and you're a team that looks like they're gonna be, a contender and be around it, you're gonna have to explore every possibility. So, all of those guys I just mentioned, like, to one extent or another, depending on price, makes sense. So it's gonna be fascinating what the Flames end up deciding to do.
It's been a train wreck over there the last few seasons with all the players that they've lost and traded and didn't want to play there. And it's one of those ones where it's like you don't know exactly what's going on behind the scenes, but you know something's going on behind the scenes where there's some sort of management situation that's just maybe the culture there isn't so great. But yeah, that gives the Bruins the opportunity if Calgary wants to make a deal at some point towards the trade deadline for sure. But to transition back to the Bruins and the Bruins defense, big game for Charlie McAvoy. He had a power play goal that he just stepped into. And there was a lot of, I know Scott, you spoke to him today after Bruins practice, and coach also talked about him and saying he's playing the best hockey that he's seen, especially offensively, since meeting Charlie McAvoy and coming in and coaching. So I just figured we could bring it back around to the Bruins D that they do have, because they have been generating offense, and Charlie McAvoy has been looking confident offensively as well.
Yeah, he's currently got a 6-game point streak, which he's only had 2 streaks longer than that in his career. He's had a pair of 8-game point streaks. Right now he's at a point per game, 12 points in 12 games, obviously with a 4-game suspension mixed in there. But like that's, we talk about like, all right, last year he had the shoulder surgery, kept him out to start the season, comes back, by his own admission, took a while to really get back up to speed and get to where he wanted to be. So he was never really in like the Norris conversation last year. Point per game, like that's kind of where you have to be nowadays to really be a serious Norris candidate. And he's there. And if people were voting right now, the 4-game suspension would be held against him. But 5 months from now, I don't know that a 4-game suspension in early November is gonna hurt him too much. So like that's what he's that's kind of the pace he's on right now and what he's setting himself up for. He like just everything's up. The assists are up, goal scoring. He's got a couple now, 3 on the season. He's shooting more. The Bruins are scoring more when he's on the ice, which for a team that we thought was going to take a step back offensively, like I wouldn't have necessarily anticipated that. I would have kind of thought, everyone might take a step back in terms of how much the Bruins are scoring when they're on the ice, and it's been the opposite with McAvoy. Right now, they're 5-on-5 goals when he's on the ice are at a career high for McAvoy. So it's been really impressive. Montgomery also credited him with Montgomery felt like once the Bruins got up by a couple goals Saturday, he thought Montreal started taking some runs and ratcheting up the physicality. And he said McAvoy was the guy who really answered that and, landed a couple big hits to sort of respond in real time. And I asked McAvoy about that, and he said, like, his first couple games back, he was like, I don't think I even hit anyone because I was just worried about getting suspended again. And now Saturday night, I guess the game kind of like forced his hand a little bit, and you saw that come back. And obviously we know that's one of the things he does best. And I get having like those first game or two back jitters after a suspension, but this is someone who's played a lot of hockey and has landed 2 suspendable hits in his entire career. Like, I think we know that he is a 99.9% clean hitter, and it might just take a little while for him to remember that, but you saw that on Saturday.
To quote Charlie McAvoy when Scott asked him this question, bro. He called Scott bro. I was like, I wonder how Scott feels about Charlie McAvoy just looking at him and going, bro.
I mean, hey, listen, BU is a brotherhood, okay? So
it's true. But he was like, bro, I never want that to happen again. Like, I'm not trying to get suspended like that again. I think he took it personally in that he feels that around the league, maybe he doesn't want his reputation to change, and that maybe people just see the 4-game suspension and don't see the rest of his games. They're not Bruins fans or from somewhere else. They might get the idea that, and like lump him in with someone like Brad Marchand and just add to the reputation. So I think he's worried about that. And I think he's conscious of what he, feeling bad that he had that hit in the first place that was suspendable. So yeah, but also you're his bro. So that's what my main takeaway was.
Takeaway was Jim Montgomery wearing all the BU gear. He must have lost a bet, like Scott said online.
He did.
But
he did because McAvoy confirmed it.
Yeah, Scott, you want to elaborate?
So Jim Montgomery hit the ice at Sunday's practice wearing a BU hat, and then in his post-practice press conference, he had both the BU hat and a BU sweater. Yeah, big weekend for the Terriers, sweeping Maine in a top 10 showdown. So, yeah, there were some in-room bets going on that, and that was what Montgomery had to do for losing. I don't know what Swayman has had to do or will have to do, because he had said on Friday when we talked to him that there were some friendly wagers between him and a couple of the BU guys on the team. So I don't know what exactly the payoff was, because Swayman was kind of feeling himself, and he was like, I think Charlie McAvoy is going to look really good in a Maine hat. So Swayman's got to wear something, but we haven't seen it just yet.
Yeah, no, and a lot of the guys, they still pay attention and go to different college hockey games where their former teams are playing, but yeah, I feel like Swayman talks a lot of crap to the other guys from different teams about, Maine, because he's still very close to Maine. I mean, he's not that far removed from playing there. He was the Mike Richter Award winner in, I think, 2020, so it's not that long ago. But he has a lot of pride for that. And then obviously Montgomery won the national title there. So those are two guys that really hold Maine in high regard. And then BU so good this year that I know McAvoy made a comment about Macklin Celebrini being he's like a unique guy. Like he was very impressed with Celebrini, which I think most people are. But I love when the college and the NHL worlds collide. That's like where I live in the middle of. So whenever they come together, I get all hyper and I start talking about it.
Yeah, and they were all at Friday's game too. I know.
Yeah.
Swayman, Montgomery, McAvoy, Shattenkirk, Grizzly, like they were all there. It was also funny when Montgomery was talking about it. He said Coyle isn't part of the bet because he was only half committed to college. Because Coyle left after halfway through the season when he was at BU to go to the Quebec Major Juniors instead.
It's not nice.
But yeah, just to circle all the way back to the McAvoy point, like I get why he's a little hesitant getting back from suspension. Obviously, you're kind of paranoid, but honestly, Scott, you mentioned he's played so much hockey, and the hit on Oliver Ekman-Larsson was so stupid, and he had to go so far out of his way to make such a stupid play. It's not even like it's, you know what I mean? It's like, I get why he's like, don't want to get suspended again, but that was just such an uncharacteristic play. Like, just get back on the bike and play hockey like you do, and just shake that. That was just a dumb play. So, but yeah, he looked more comfortable and he's getting back in the groove of things. And yeah, I love the shot first mentality on the 5-on-3. It's funny. The Bruins on Instagram, they've been doing this thing the last couple of years where like they'll on their story or on their feed, they'll post an in-game footage from like the corner dash, like, and there's no commentary. It's just the game. And so on the 5-on-3 goal, you hear the crowd in the background, wicked loud, yelling, "Shoot, come on, shoot!" And then McAvoy finally shoots it, and everybody goes crazy. It was just like, it was funny because it was from the Bruins main account, and you just hear the fans heckling the power play on a 5-on-3. But yeah, no,
that's what you'll hear any game you ever go to is someone screaming shoot, even if the Bruins are on the other end of the ice. It's like, no, no, stop.
It was funny.
I once sat next to a fan who was yelling, "You're going the wrong way" at the Bruins, and I'm like, I think they know which way they're supposed to be going.
It was funny. There was one. Yes.
Yeah, that was last week up on my floor.
There was one early in the game Saturday. I don't know if the Bruins are on the power play for his 5-on-5, but some guy like kind of right below us, like in the balcony, but like lower end of the balcony, losing his mind, yelling "shoot" in like a situation where there were like 7 bodies between the point and the net. It was just like a mass of bodies, and I'm like, dude, there are literally like 7 people in the way. Like, what are you talking about?
But, you know, that's just par for the course. Any game you'll ever go to, doesn't matter what fan base. So everybody's got their like 3 beers in and they're like, shoot. Especially Scott. So don't sit near Scott. Try not to sit near Scott. Which the funny thing is Scott tries not to sit near me, but they automatically put both of us next to each other. So poor Scott has to deal with me. I wanted to, before we go off the rails like we did last episode, and also because we're getting to the end here, Mason Lohrei. We talked about McAvoy. Sorry if you keep hearing that. My watch, I keep hitting it on my table. Mason Lohrei's game. I wanted to get you guys' thoughts on it.
I thought you were just trying to get my attention.
Yeah, I don't know why I keep doing this, but I just keep slamming it onto like a glass countertop. And
Bridget's like, pay attention. Pay attention.
It's probably not great for the watch, honestly, guys. It would be the like 10th thing of my technology that I broke this year because I'm already on my 3rd laptop, and my phone. I cracked my phone at a wedding. But yeah,
that's not good.
No. So anyway, what did you guys think of Lohrei? We've kind of been going through his ups and downs, and I guess to keep going with that, how do you think he played against Montreal?
Kind of a microcosm of his entire sample size so far. There's times where, he shows his elusiveness and skating ability and playmaking ability, and creates offense. And for the most part, defensively, he's fine. And then there's other times where, like the Montreal second goal, it's a net mound scramble. And, it's not – look, I've seen – not to compare the players, okay, at all. But I've seen Matt Grzelcyk get out muscled in front before and have, the opponent score. I've seen it happen to every Bruins defenseman, right? But yeah, on that play, like Lohrei just kind of gets lost, loses his man in front. I forget who it was for Montreal to score. But so, you don't love to see that. You like to see him, identify a stick or a body and kind of make that play not happen. I don't know, Scott. I mean, did you see anything in particular in this game that hasn't kind of been what you've seen, throughout the last, what it's been, 8 games?
I thought he was getting more involved offensively than he has in maybe, the last couple games, closer to what we were seeing like his first couple. He like the one spin move he made and then kind of drove low and got the puck to the front. Like that stands out, but I thought he was a little more active offensively in general. But you're right. Like there was still at least that one really notable hiccup defensively. I think he turned the puck over in a breakout, like his first or second shift of the game too. There weren't a ton of mistakes, but there's still just a couple there where you're like, all right, like there's still work to do to clean things up. I would say it was a good game for him overall, but certainly not perfect. So I guess small step in the right direction, maybe. I still think he's probably going to have a really strong week between now and next Saturday if he's going to force his way into the lineup even after Grzelcyk comes back. But yeah, I didn't think he like actively hurt his case on Saturday.
And I noticed, and this just because it stuck out to me in the post-game press conference with Montgomery, saying like he's seen Lohrei improve since he's come up, and that he's noticed that he's been able to take the coaching and in game learn from the mistakes, like in his sample size here in Boston, that he's been able to kind of learn through it and grow from playing in the NHL. I know, Scott, you were there, so I'm guessing you probably had some thoughts about that when he mentioned, because I bring it up just because we're talking about what's better for the development, and coach did mention he thinks he's seen development since he came up and playing in the NHL and in trying to fix those mistakes at this level.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like that needs to happen with a young player. So it's good that it is. I don't think it necessarily means like, all right, well then in that case, keep him up and let him work through mistakes, because I also think he can learn and improve in the AHL too. Like, so I think he can do that either place. But yes, if he is going to stick at the NHL, he obviously has to learn on the fly because he is very far from a finished product. So, yeah, I mean that's good, but that's what you have to do for any young player.
Can I ask you guys one question that just popped into my mind? One thing I realized last night, and one thing I realized on opening night and against the Maple Leafs. Can you guys get on board with going back to wearing white at home? And here's why. Here's why. If you're gonna watch the Bruins at home wear the same uniform, every game, might as well watch them wear white and then have all the visiting teams come in and show their colors off, as opposed to all the visiting teams wearing white. Like I think there's something cool about the away team coming in a dark sweater, whatever their color is what it is. It just kind of, I feel like it just adds a little bit more personality to each game in Boston. I don't know if it's the Bruins logo on the ice and the away team wearing dark and the Bruins wearing white. Just, I don't know. You guys, can you guys get on that train?
So my take on this for a while has been, I just wish they had more flexibility where you can wear either one at home. And like, whether you schedule it in advance or it's just kind of what you're feeling at the time because you're on a winning streak or you're on a losing streak and you want to break that or whatever. Like, I just wish there was flexibility. There's a lot of things the NBA gets wrong fashion wise. I think NBA teams have too many different jerseys. I think the courts they're playing on for this in-season tournament are an absolute abomination for the most part. But one thing the NBA gets right is you see a lot of teams wear white and their primary color at home, and like it alternates. Like if you go to the Celtics, you might see them in white, you might see them in green. I like that. I know some people like it one way or the other for the sake of consistency. I wish there was more room to sort of go back and forth, which we're seeing this year from the Bruins because their third jerseys that they're wearing on these Eras nights are obviously white, so like we are getting to see it. But normally there's very, very few games, not just in Boston, but like league wide, where the home team wears white.
Yeah, here's our impromptu fashion segment that we didn't know was coming, but Brian just once again to finish out the episode went fashion segment.
Well, I couldn't help but notice how, like, I was watching the game on TV, and I just couldn't help but think to myself, I feel like Montreal's red, white, and blue jerseys looked so much better in Boston than they do in Montreal. Not so much better. It's the same jerseys. But there's something like visually pleasing about watching those red Montreal sweaters on Boston ice and the Bruins wearing white on Boston ice. I've always been of the home team are wearing white every game, just the logo changes. It's just kind of monotonous. But for the Bruins fans to see all the different colors come into town, you know what I mean? Like the home crowd's going to see one jersey regardless. So you might as well see the home fans are going to see one jersey regardless from their team, right? So if you're going to see different colors come in, you might as well have the away teams come in with different uniforms every time. It just kind of adds personality to the games, I feel like, for the home audience. And that goes around the entire league. Like for teams to watch the Bruins come into town wearing, their black jerseys and yellow socks, I feel like would be, well, historically, it would be cool. And I think like watching old footage or old clips of like the Montreal Canadiens wearing their white jerseys in the old Montreal Forum, like I just like home teams wearing white and then the visiting team coming in with whatever colors they wear. I have memories of like being in like the late 90s of like going to the Garden or the Fleet Center at the time and seeing like the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim come into town with their awesome uniforms, or like the Philadelphia Flyers wearing their orange jerseys. So thanks for having that fashion segment banner ready to go, Bridget. But
always that's what I made it for.
These original 6 era nights, it's the Canadians popped on TV last night so much, and I was like, I had to bring this up in the moment. Thank you for.
And by the way, the fashion segment, it's not an official fashion segment unless Brian brings up the 90s Anaheim Ducks jerseys as well. So we cut that in too.
That is true. That is very true. Honestly, some of the best hockey uniforms out there, those Ducks jerseys, and then for college hockey, the University of Maine. No offense, Scott, but Maine has some pretty sick jerseys too because they were playing BU recently. But anyway.
Well, yeah, BU versus Maine gives you like the best jersey matchup you can get in college hockey. So yeah, that was
but I don't.
That was great to watch.
I don't like how BU goes to these like 2-stripe uniforms. Like their traditional jerseys are so awesome. Like the Red Wings, it just says BU on it or whatever. I don't know.
It says Boston on it, actually.
But
get it right, Brian.
I love all BU jerseys. I've loved a lot of the throwbacks they've used as well in recent years. I will say, like, by far the best jersey matchups the Bruins have had this year have been the 2 era nights games. This one against the Canadians with those red, and the first one was against the Red Wings with their red, which again is nice to see in Boston because it's probably been a long time since we've seen Detroit wearing red in Boston.
Or the
It's probably
Blackhawks.
just always been white. Yeah, exactly.
You got to see the Blackhawks
same
logo?
thing opening night. Right.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. Anyway, so that's my 2 cents. Hopefully the NHL either does what Scott says and just kind of give flexibility or go back to whites at home. That's it for the fashion segment brought to you by do we have a sponsor for that? No? Okay, I'll find one.
We should.
It's wide open. It's wide open. If someone out there wants to step up to the plate.
Yes.
Oh goodness. All right. Well, thanks to me, we've gone long now. Do you guys have anything before we wrap up? Bruins are playing Tampa tomorrow. That's a good one.
I mean, we haven't. So we touched on it being Eras nights, but we haven't even talked about the pregame ceremony for the Big Bad Bruins for the 1970 and 1972 Cup winners, which just was really cool to see in person. It was, I didn't see if there was like an official list of everyone who was out there, but it had to have been 15 to 20 guys. It was a lot of them. And obviously all the big names, or Esposito, Busick, Cheever, Sanderson, Cashman, like all there. And they got to raise their banners for the first time, because back in the 70s, teams didn't have banner raising ceremonies on opening night of the next season. You showed up for the next season and your banner was up. So that was pretty cool. And we got to talk to a couple of the guys. We got to talk to Dallas Green and Wayne Cashman between periods. And they said like it was special for them. Like it brought back a lot of memories when they were standing there lifting those banners up. So that was cool. That was Cam Neely talked to us too and said like it was an idea that someone like in the Bruins marketing department realized that like that team, they didn't do that back then, and thought, that might be a cool idea for this Eras night. And it was like, that was a really cool way to celebrate those teams.
Here's a fashion question for you. Jerry Cheever's mask, is that the most iconic mask in hockey?
Yes. And Linus Ullmark had a helmet that replicated it. Unfortunately, it wasn't his turn in the rotation, so we didn't actually get to see it much in the game, and obviously doesn't really wear it on the bench. So that was a little bit of a bummer, but that looked pretty sick. Ullmark having the stitches in a new mask. I assume
potentially a different Eras night, if he is in the net, he would wear that. I mean, I don't think it's just for show. I assume he'll wear that at some point.
I don't know. I mean, but, that's really, I mean, I guess technically it could tie to the next era, because the next era is the lunch pail AC of like late 70s, early 80s. So, and Cheevers was on some of those teams as well, like 77, 78 teams. So, maybe there's still an opportunity there for the next one.
Otherwise, it's just a pretty little prop. But yeah, I was like, oh, that's easily the most iconic goalie helmet that there ever was, and there's just that good story behind it too, obviously. So it was kind of a funny idea, and it looked like it also looked great. It looked intense. So anyway, that's my fashion thought. You're welcome. I don't usually have many, but
no, that's a great fashion segment.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, Bridget and Scott, I think we've probably touched on everything for this episode. The Bruins are playing the Lightning on Monday, and we'll be having one more episode prior to Thanksgiving that will drop Tuesday or Wednesday. So if you guys are good, until then, thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you very soon. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.